welcome to A Podful of Saints on the 7th of August 2023. Second time today I've had to say that, because now we have a very special guest. We are delighted, we really are delighted to have Ian Allinson on the podcast. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the invite.
It's great to have you. With myself, David Tavener, Jake Ellacott and Lee Wood. Evening, gents.
Hello, hello.
Evening, fellas. I think it's going to be a busy one.
Oh, it's going to be fascinating. But Ian, we're going to go back right to the beginning. You're born in North Hertfordshire. Was it Hitchin or Stevenage?
Hitchin, yeah, Lister Hospital in Hitchin, which was an old-fashioned hospital in them days, wasn't it? I think it's the only hospital that was a maternity hospital at that stage. So family moved up in early 57 and I was born in the October 57.
Right, and you grew up in Stevenage, funny enough, in York Road, which is ironic given the 6 years you spent with us.
It was there, but early on was around the Merrymead, Willows area till we moved up there. Was about 13 years of age we moved up there, and then so at 16 I moved away to Colchester.
All right. When did people notice that you stood out from the other footballers? How young age was it?
I'd like to think probably about 8, 9 or 10, around about that area. I mean, I always remember we played one team, beat them 19-0, and I got 8 goals. And I think most of the representative sides, I represented most of the Stevenage minor league as it was at the stage, and the Stevenage junior schools, right the way through from probably 8 till about 11 or 12. Then I'd probably have to say that a decision that my family made was probably one that probably hindered my career, I feel. And it's so wrong to say that your family made a decision, but my mum and dad wanted me to obviously try and progress through the schools, and I ended up going to Allinson Grammar School in the Old Town in Stevenage. I didn't play football, only played rugby, hockey and cricket. And I feel that really held me back from really going on to maybe a first division side a lot earlier than what I did, because you didn't really get seen on a Sunday afternoon. Most of the times you got seen was through the English Schools FA, and I wasn't allowed to play in them because obviously I was at a rugby school. So it's wrong to blame them, but I think they did it for the right reasons. But I think it's just one of them that held me back, because most of the time in my career, they were the ones at the forefront of making sure I was at every ground I needed to be at early and taking me all over the country. And they were the big supporters that I had in the early part of my career. And so you got so much to thank them for, but this one small decision, I feel, just held me back from probably moving on a lot quicker than I think I would have done.
You moved, as you say, down to Colchester. Was it after that Colchester picked you up, or they spotted you before then?
No, I'd had a trial. My dad wrote off for a trial. Went down for a trial and did okay. Scored a goal. We won 2-1. And then the elite of that game, of that trial game, was invited back to play a guy called John Ruin, who, funny enough, I met a couple of years ago at Haringey. Brought an elite team down from Enfield, and we played that game. And it's just you have odd moments in your life, in your career, where things go for you. And I had one of them days where I'd scored 4. Created 4. We won 9-4 on the day, fun enough, and just happened to have Jim Smith was watching on the sidelines before we could leave. And we played the game over at the Army ground in Colchester. And before we could leave the ground, my mum and dad and myself was invited back into his office and virtually offered a deal straight away. And then 2 weeks later, I'd signed the deal to start on July the 1st, 1974.
So you're knocking in a few goals back then. What position were you playing?
I played up front or on the wing, exactly where I played most of my career. I think one year I got 80 goals, one year playing for Roebuck United, and then went on to Bedwell Rangers for the last 2 years. So it was always one of them. I could go through a pair. We never had trainers in our days, David, did we? We had plimsolls, and I'd go through a pair of plimsolls in one day. My mum would get them out of the cupboard. I'd start in the morning at 9 o'clock, and they'd be one out by 4 o'clock. But that's how it was. When we lived in the Willows in Merrymead, we lived literally 100 yards from Shepherdbury Park. And we was over there literally every single day. Every time it was light, we was over there. And that was just the way that just football was in me from really year one.
Colchester took you on as an apprentice, eventually made you professional. Well over 300 games with them before you joined North London's second biggest club. That must have been quite a move.
It was an experience. There was lots of talks of clubs looking at me during the last 2 years. Colchester moved me from a winger to more of a centre forward, or playing off a centre forward. So we had Kevin Brennan and Roy McDonough, who were a handful for any team. So I played off them two really, and I scored 52 goals in 2 seasons. Then it came to a renegotiation of my contract, and it was all to do with something to do with like a loyalty bonus that I was due, and they wanted to pay back the loyalty because I'd done 9 years. They wanted to pay the loyalty bonus I was due because it was now starting to get out of control in terms of the money that they would have owed me if I'd have stayed there probably for 15, 20 years. So, but they didn't give me a pay rise. So when you worked out over the course of a 2 or 3 year contract, the actual contract that offered me was I think it was something £15 a week worse off than it was by me signing a new contract. So we went to there was a guy called John Hayes who I went to see. He put the it's not a complaint. It was just like to say that the contract is worse. We're entitled to a free transfer because in them days there was no Bosman ruling or anything like that. Went up to Manchester, had a hearing there. We won the hearing, and then we had to wait 2 weeks for Colchester to appeal that. And funny enough, they appealed it, and the hearing was at Highbury 2 weeks later, and we managed to win that. But in that period, I'd agreed to join Fulham. So with Malcolm McDonald and Ray Hartford, because I played with Ray at Colchester. He was the assistant manager at Colchester. I was there, so I knew him quite well. And the deal was done. As long as I got a free transfer, I would go and join Fulham. So I spoke to Malcolm McDonald on the Friday after the hearing, to say that I'd won the hearing. What did he want me to do next? And they were playing at Carlisle on the Saturday. And he said, well, come along to the game. He said, just have a look at everything. He said, and then we'll get everything sorted out for Monday morning. So I went to the game at Carlisle. They won 3-0 Fulham. He gave me my contract in the boardroom at Carlisle. I said, do you want me to sign it now? He went, no, just bring it in with you on Monday morning. And that's a lesson you're going to have to learn when people ask you to sign. Make sure you get them to sign straight away. I was playing cricket down at Sudbury on the Sunday. Literally picked my bag up to go out the door. The phone rang because we didn't have mobile phones in them days as well. So this is a lot of things happening in the olden days. Picked the phone up, and at the end of the call was an Irish voice, and I didn't know it was. And he said that he was Terry Neal. I went, no, come on, who are you? And he went, no, it's Terry Neal. He said, Alan Hunter would kindly give him my number, the old Ipswich manager who'd been my manager for a period of time, and just asked me if I signed for Fulham. Said, do you want to come and have a chat about signing for Arsenal? And then we agreed that I would go in at 10 o'clock in the morning, bearing in mind I was supposed to be in at Fulham at 11 o'clock in the morning. So just literally got a train into Highbury. And I always remember it in terms of, I sat there and I'd got a 3-year deal with Fulham. Arsenal had offered me a 2-year deal. Slightly negative in terms of that. Overall, the 3-year deal at Fulham was probably better than the 2-year deal at Arsenal. And then when they asked me for a decision, I said, look, this is, at the back of my mind, there's a slightly better deal from Fulham. And the one thing that Ken Fryer said to me at the time, he went, yes, but this is Arsenal. And being my club the whole time, being a family's club, they were all brought up in and around Islington, Highbury, and it was just one of them that it don't matter what they'd have offered me, I'd have signed, but I was just trying my luck. And I signed a 2-year deal with a year's option. And after 18 months, that was extended for another 2 years by Don Howe. So I ended up doing 4 years there.
You mentioned Harlow Town back there, Ian. That must have been at the old sports
It
arena
was,
ground, when
yeah.
it had those big banks all the way around.
Yeah.
Now, there is one of the coldest nights at which I've watched a football match. It was City, I don't know, back in the 70s or 80s. It was almost as cold as that night we went to Harrogate. We'll come on to that later, no doubt.
I managed
Anyway,
there as well, David.
Yes, I know you did, yes.
Harlow in that same stadium. It was hard work in there. It really was.
I bet it was. A very atmosphere-less place, that one, and cold. Right, Arsenal end, as you say, 4 years there. Good times, happy times. You were hoping for a place at Wembley, weren't you? But it didn't come off, and yet you pretty much got them there.
Yeah, it was disappointing. We just had a couple of days relaxing in Portugal. Then we came back, and on the Wednesday we was training at London Coney. I played every game from the semi-final up to the final. I expected that I'd get on the bench, and out of the blue, George Graham said, "Right, this is the team for Wembley. Named the team, and these are the two subs." And there was only two subs in them days, and he named. I'm not sure. I think Perry Groves was certainly one. Might have been. I'm not sure it was. And I wasn't in the 13, and it seemed a weird dream. And there was a couple of things that went on there which was disappointing. I feel from where I was is that I got. Apologise for that. I thought I put it on silent as well. There was. The fact is, on the Saturday, I was asked to play in the reserves, where the team that was playing and the squad was training at Highbury, and then went off to the Noak, funny enough, in near St Albans. And I played. Graham Ricks and myself played for the reserves against West Ham. I scored a hat trick, and we met up with the team afterwards at the Noak. And then when we got to Wembley, I thought at least I'd be sitting on the bench watching the game. And we was told that we were sitting in the stands with our wives, which was disappointing considering what happened and the way we was treated. I felt was really poorly from. And I'm not saying it's from Arsenal. I think it's from George Graham in terms of the way he wanted to show that he had the power. But I think we should have and deservedly should have been treated better than what we was that day. But you can't knock the guy, because at the end of the day he won trophies. He brought a new era into the football club. That got finished off, eventually with some of the players that come through with Arsene Wenger.
After leaving Arsenal, you had a little time at Stoke City, went closer to home, Luton Town, back to Colchester, and finished up at Baldock Town. Baldock, where you became player manager. Did you always think you would get into football management when your days were over?
No, I don't know really. I used to go and watch Baldock quite a lot because my brother played for them. And then one day I'd gone to see them, and I think they were looking to change the manager, and said, "Would you be interested?" Now, it just coincided that Jock Wallace, the old Rangers manager, and Alan Ball were the managers manager and coach at Colchester, and he said they'd give me a free transfer if I want to go. So obviously they'd had enough of me as well, so they were desperate to get rid of me. And it just come to coincidence that that there was an opportunity to go in and manage and be a player manager, and probably one of the worst things I ever did, David, in terms of being a player manager, because it's just one of them things. I admire anybody who says they're a player manager these days. So in my experience now, a player manager just plays, and you have an experienced manager or a number two who will manage. And then during the week you can be a manager. But on match days you just become a player. I think I was trying to manage the team and do everything and play as well, and it's just impossible. And we had some good spells there, but overall it wasn't great. I didn't feel, from a playing point of view, I thought I did okay. And then your time's on the wall when people don't start supporting you so much, and then it's just a matter of time before we got the sack, or I got the sack. And then you'll probably tell me I went on to Stotfold at Stotfold.
How did you end up there? Because that doesn't seem like a forward move.
I was sitting in my house reading the Comet newspaper, and there was an advert for the Stotfold Football Club's job. And I thought, what am I doing with myself? I'm doing nothing. So I actually applied for it, and they gave me an interview, and I got the job. And that's when I decided that I didn't want to be a player manager anymore. So I packed up playing and just become a manager. And we did really well. We turned the club round. I think we got 105 points or 102 points and come runners up, and scored 120 goals to Rawn's 10. Crazy leagues, crazy leagues. And we didn't win the league. And then it was after that, I started to apply for a few jobs because I felt I'd done well at that level, that I could put myself back up out there again. And eventually, I think it was it Barton Rovers after that, David? You'll tell me.
Well, can we backtrack a little bit, Ian? Because during your 6 years at Stotfold, you actually went AWOL for almost 24 hours with Steve Evans at Corby Town. What happened there?
Steve rang me during the day. I was working for Colesberg. He was working for Coca-Cola. I think he was Virgin at the time. Or it might have been Coca-Cola, one of the two. He said, I need to have a chat with you. Now, to be fair, we always got on, but we didn't get on. It was one of them. It was a love-hate relationship. Is that on match days, we hated each other terribly. And because he was manager of Holbeach and Stamford, and I was manager. I mean, we were both vying to win the league at the end of the day. And then one year, I think he pipped us, and one year we pipped them, and so on, so on. So he rang me. I had a meeting with him in the Novotel at Stevenage. He just explained that he'd become chairman and owner of Corby Town, and he'd like me to be their manager. I said, great, fine. And we sat there for probably an hour. Come up with a deal which was good, and then we said we'd meet up in the evening. So I drove to Corby in the evening, met the fellow directors, had some photos done with a Corby scarf, rang. I don't know whether I'd rang Stotfold or not. I'm not sure. I got to that stage where I think I'd let them know I was going to have a conversation. I'd let them know the outcome, and on the way back, I'm thinking, this ain't going to work. There's no way There's no way Steve Evans and myself can work together, because we've got two big egos in terms of where managers are concerned. I've always believed that a manager should pick his own squad, and you live and die by your decisions. And I'm thinking, well, Steve would probably want some input in terms of what's going on. I just didn't think it would work. Didn't sleep all night. Rang up Steve Evans at 7:20 in the morning and just said, look, Steve, I've had a long think overnight, and it's just not my job. Appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not going to be that out to take up the job. Then I had to go calling back to Stotfold just to say I've had second thoughts, and I'm not going to go. So I were over the moon with that Stotfold word, but it was just one of them where, you know, it was just, you just got to put yourself out there really, and it just wasn't right for me at the time. But I did want to move on, because, you know, Stotfold, great little club, great, fantastic people. And when you talk about volunteers, you see how the volunteers work there. They were outstanding in terms of what they put in. And it was nice to give them something back in terms of putting them up there, winning some silverware, winning some Bedfordshire Senior Cups, and putting them back up in the league.
We had another 4 years with Stotfold, a year with Barton Rovers, then as you said, with Harlow Town, another year, a couple of years with Barton. And then you took quite a big step forward. Well, some would say, some of us might disagree. You went to Boreham Wood. How did that come about?
Is that the first time or the second time?
First time. You went there for a season, by the looks of it.
The first time, I'd had an interview with Danny prior, when I was at Stotfold. I had a great interview with him, to be fair. Great conversation, probably a 2.5 hour conversation. Just spoke football for 2.5 hours. Unbelievable. Bloke knows everything about everything. And he gave me a really nice phone call, just to say that he was going to go with, I'm trying to think who the guy was. It got down to two people. He said, you interviewed really well. He said, but I want to go with, he was manager of Slough at the time, which I actually can't think of his name. And he said, and Steve Brown.
Yeah, sounds about right.
I think he's actually passed away since then. Yeah. Steve Brown. He said, and I'm going to go with Steve. Fine. And I said, but if it doesn't work out, you know where I am. And I think it was about a few months later, there was a few things going on. I think Steve had left, and I rang Danny and just said, look, what's the situation? He said, come and have another conversation. And we went down there, and I got the job the first time. Again, I think it was one of those times where you need to try and change the personnel, because a lot of the players that went in there were Steve's players, and they were very good players. But the first game I took over them was at Leighton Town, down in Leytonstone, and we lost the game, but the performance was outstanding. But I think of a lot of them, you know, were Steve's players, and you know, a lot of them, once a manager moves on, players then decided that they wanted to move on, and it was just really trying to change around personnel. We didn't do bad, but I think, you know, it was a difficult time, a different place to be a manager of Boreham Wood on the first time. And then we went through a really horrendous period of games, losing games. I think we lost about 6 or 7 on the trot, and then Danny decided to give me the sack over at Barton Rovers, funny enough. We lost 2-0 to a team we should never have lost, but I think that, you know, the team had lost its way then. And then I think I virtually made a decision to pack up after that. And then I went and watched Lee play at Leverstock Green, and they were winning. And I'd had a few problems with the gallstones, the gallbladder, and stuff like that. So I was waiting for an operation, and Phil Pateman, who was the chairman of Stotfold again, rang me out there, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing nothing. I'm watching Lee. I'm really enjoying myself. No pressure, nothing." He said, "Would you come and give me a hand?" I said, "Well, why is that?" He said, "Well, we're bottom of the table." He said, "We've just got beat 7-0. He said, "And I want to sack the manager." I said, "Well, on my advice, think about what you're doing, sleep on it, and have a conversation with the manager tomorrow. And what's happening during the week?" He said, "Well, we've got Rawns away on the Tuesday night." I said, "Well, have a chat with him, see if you can help him, and see how you get on Tuesday night." 10:10 on Tuesday night, he rings me again. "You need to come in on Thursday." I said, "What's happened?" He said, "We just got beat 10-0. And I went in on the Thursday night, but now I'd had the operation anyway and things like that. And I said, "Okay." I said, "Where do we start?" And he went, "Well, this is it. We're bottom of the table." I think this would have been just before Christmas. I said, "But I'm going away for 3 weeks. I'm going to Australia for a couple of weeks." I said, "So Ian Donnelly will come in and take over while I'm away." He made a couple of signings while I was away. And then we managed to keep them up virtually last game of the season. Changed it around again. You have to get personnel in. We was lucky that we signed a couple of players who had good experience, but I always knew that lurking in the background, we had Potton, where Lee was playing, where a lot of his mates and Ian Donnelly's boys were playing there, that we could turn things around and maybe have a real good go at it the year after. And that's what we did. You know, we brought all them boys in for Potton, and we won the league really easy the year after. And Bed Senior Cup, we had a great year. I think we won 3 or 4 things that year, and that's when Danny comes calling the second time.
Any doubts about going back to Boreham Wood? Or
No.
It's quite a step up, so I'd imagine it's quite an easy decision.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing with Stotfold, there was talk of them getting a new ground. When we won that league, and they said they couldn't go up to, it would have been probably the Ryman Division 1 North at the time, as the way the leagues were structured. The new ground was still not ready, and there'd been talks of the new ground being ready for sort of 7, 8, 9 years. That still wasn't ready, and eventually they got the ground, I think 10 years after I left. So it just shows you how long it takes to get the new ground. And no, I went back. Danny rang me. I went and had a meeting with him. The conversation was that, you know, they'd just been relegated. I think they lost at Ramsgate last season, so they were in the Ryman Division 1 North. He said, "We have got a little bit of a hope, looking at how the league is structured, is that Halifax have gone bust, so their demise mean that the lowest or the worst, no, the best relegated team would remain in their division." And Boreham Wood happened to be that team. So we stayed in the Ryman League Premier Division. Quite a baptism, really, in terms of game. We've had to change personnel because they'd been relegated. I brought a few boys in from Stotfold who did very well. But again, it was a tough league to stay in, and I think we managed to stay. Last game of the season, we needed a point against Dartford, and we drew 0-0 with Dartford, stayed up, and then the following year got promotion, which was into the Conference South, which was amazing.
Yeah, went up by the Sorry, Ian, yeah.
Yeah, it went up by the playoffs. Yeah, you did right. But for us to turn that league around like we did, and then perform like we did, to get in the playoffs. Again, we had to beat, I think it was Tooting and Mitcham last game of the season, and we beat them 3-2 to get into the playoffs. And I think a couple of clubs, just thinking back now, one of them being Kingstonian and the other one rested some players because they're already in the playoffs. And what happened, because we won and they lost, we jumped up 1 or 2 places. So from where we might have been 5th, we ended up being 3rd, and got home draw. We got away draw to Abley 4th. We ended up, sorry, Kingstonian finished 5th. we got an away draw on the Monday night at Aveley and won 1-0. And then we went and watched Kingstonian, Danny and myself, Sutton at Sutton on the Tuesday night, and Kingstonian beat Sutton, which was a big turn up. That meant we was at home on the Saturday against Kingstonian, and only because they'd obviously rested some players on the Saturday, and we finished one place above them in the league, so we got home advantage. And we were playing against Martin Tyler's team there, who was at Kingstonian, and they'd already done the double over us that year as well. So we knew we was in for a tough game, but on the day we were brilliant. Won it 2-0, and then
Who's manager there? It wasn't
Dowson.
Dowson, you're
That's
thinking of.
it.
Yeah,
That's
Dowson. Sounds like Boswell, though, doesn't it? Yeah, so he and then we got into the Conference South, and I think we had first year was a struggle. Good baptism. I think second year we did a lot better, and then the third year to be fair, we should have won it in the end. We were very, very good side. We made some good signings. I think we were lucky that we signed Junior Moraes and Liango. We got them both on loan the previous year, and then we signed them the next year as a pair, and they were probably as good as anything in the league. People like Ricky Shakes, who we probably didn't see the best of last year, and people like that were outstanding, very, very good players. And you know, we had Sam Cox in midfield, centre halves. I mean, I know we signed Ben Martin from you towards the end of it just to shore up the defence, but you know, we had a good side, and we should have won the league really, let alone going through the playoffs. We played Bromley at Bromley and absolutely battered them and lost 2-1. But we should have been outside in that game, and that gave them the league. And we had to go through the playoffs again. We went to Havant over 2 legs, beat them 2-0 down there, and drew 2 at home. And then we beat probably the best side in the league at the time was Whitehall with Steve King as manager. And we beat them 2-1 after extra time in the playoff final.
Of course, Wood went up, but you didn't go with them as manager anyway.
I did for 10 games.
Right. And it became too much, presumably, with your full-time job.
Well, it's like anything in football. There isn't a lot of security in terms of a watertight contract. Probably look at contracts now with some of the top managers in these leagues. They get their 3 or 4 year contracts and they get full payment. A lot of the contracts you might only get a 3-month severance pay and things like that. So we never really got to discussion of having a contract. Trying to run a conference side and still work is a very, very difficult, time-consuming exercise. Though we played very, very well in a lot of the games, we were excellent. If you look at probably the 10, 11 games I was there, I would say 7 of them we conceded goals in the last 10, 15 minutes. And it was just down to pure fitness and just the fitness levels. And Danny made a decision that he wanted to go full-time. He was in a position to do it. We'd have to make some really difficult decisions. He was happy for me to go part-time. And I tried it for 2 weeks. We went to Kidderminster, and it's very difficult because the players there were with Luke, and Junior Lewis was the coach at the time, and they were working every single day. And then I was turning up like on a Tuesday and a Thursday and then a Saturday for the game. We went to Kidderminster and drew 1-1. And then we beat Welling, funny enough, 2-0. And I felt it just wasn't working. And I made a big decision, sad decision, really sad from where I was to step away. It was difficult because I worked so hard to get them there. You know, even then I'd gone to Tranmere in front of 6,000 people and won 2-0. Another player that signed for St Albans, obviously Graham Montgomery, scored one of the goals. So to go to Tranmere in front of 6,000 people who were a full-time side, had just been relegated and win 2-0, it was a fantastic achievement. But it took its toll, to be fair. And in one way, because you're not full-time, it was quite an easy decision to step aside at that time. Though it was something that I didn't want to do, it was probably the best thing. And then sat around waiting to see what opportunities come along.
The St Albans job you took the following February 2016. Did you ask for it, or did the club come after you?
No, I rang the club back in November, I think it was. had a meeting with the club. The club were already a long way down the line with another manager, and they wanted to go down the line with that manager. I did get involved in the conversation very late, but the club, I think, were ready to make a decision on a new manager. And it didn't really happen. And then it was just really sitting and waiting to see where we was. I think they then went down the line with Harry, who came in and got a bit of a response, didn't he? And then they went down the route. They were looking as if they were going to get relegated. And I just put a phone call in one day and just said, look, you know, what's the situation? Again, this is a second phone call. What's the situation? If you are still looking for a manager, looking for a change, then I'd love to come and talk to you. And that's what I did. Got appointed there and then. And the rest of it, I suppose, is history, if you want to say, from that side of it. First game was against Concord Rangers, 2-0 up. Scored a perfectly good third goal and then ended up hanging on and only just drawing, should I say. And then we went to Ebbsfleet, I think, on the Tuesday, lost 1-0. And then went to Bath on the Saturday and got beat 2-0. It was probably one of the worst performances I've seen from any team that I've been involved in. We were just so lacklustre, no fight.
It was only 1-0, Ian. They missed 2 penalties kindly, though.
Oh, was it? It was 1-0. Well, there you go.
After that game, we did the interview in the dugout at Bath there. 13 minutes long, that interview, but it's fascinating, the insight you give of what is needed to get us out of a hole. We were 11 games, I think we'd had 1 win. Going into it, Bath had only won 1 in 14. And it was fascinating. I played it back this afternoon, how you laid out exactly what was needed. We had 12 games to go, and you said we need to win 8 of them. And can you guess how many of those 12 games we actually won?
We won 8, drew 2 and lost 2. And the 2 we lost was to
right.
Sutton and to Havant, I think it was. The 2 teams that went up.
Maidstone was the other one.
Maidstone, sorry. The two games we lost, wasn't it? Yeah. Maidstone and Sutton, the 2 teams we lost. And we drew 2 games. And we were 1-0 down against Weston-super-Mare. And they looked like they were going to take us apart. And last 20 minutes, we found some energy from somewhere. I think Michael Falasitas got the winner, didn't he? And then Louis got one as well. Louis Filipanis got one. And we just took off from there. It's like any football club. If you get the players on side, and then, you know, managing is the easiest part when everybody's focused on what you're doing. And once they got that little bit of a feel, the crowd started to come back, didn't it? I think my first game there was something like 350 against Weston-super-Mare, and in the end we ended up with sort of 1,700-1,800 against Dartford, wasn't it?
But it was a decent game, that one, yes. But it's incredible, the players you had. Harry Wheeler, unfortunately, he's in charge of the under-23s this season, by the way. He was unable to get the best out of them. But the players you had, Louis Theophanos, Charlie McDonald, as you mentioned, the unfortunate Michael Falasitas. You brought in Harry Anderson on loan. You also had Lee Chappell, Ben Martin, Tom Bender, Sam Corcoran. That side should be performing, shouldn't it, really?
They're just all very, very good players. And if you get that group together, then you've got to manage them correctly. And for me, it was just really one of them, is just getting them on side. Once you get them players on side, they're excellent players. And we managed to do that. You know, we had a bit of fun on the way. Obviously, you've got to have some discipline in there as well, because the people have got to realise they can't step out of line. But we managed to get everyone on side. We managed to get some performances. We found some energy from somewhere. And even going back to, you know, you're looking at some of the big performances, I think, at Maidenhead away, and Welchie made an unbelievable save to keep us in the game there. And then Michael Falasitas rode 4 challenges and put the ball in the back of the net with about 8 minutes to go. So you look at all of them performances were outstanding in that running. But as you said, but the side was a good side. And we've got to say that they'd underachieved up to that first part, or probably 2/3 of that season.
Well, after that Bath game, the next week we beat Whitehawk 6-0 at home, having lost 6-0 away. Later on, we beat Havant and Waterlooville 6-0, and then Dartford 4-0. Right, I've said enough. Jake and Lee, you must have some great memories from that time. Far away.
They were drunken ones, certainly, weren't they? Look, Ian, I think you and I have worked closely when I was part of the media team at City, and I think you alluded to it there. How do you manage a changing room with so many sort of egos. If you think the likes of Theophanis, and you had Lee Chappell, and Ben Martin was there, and Sam Corcoran, all these players who are vying for attention, how do you manage that? Because the thing is that it couldn't have been easy. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the conversations that we've had, I know how hard it was to make sure that everyone is pulling in the right direction. And you had, on the whole, massive successes with it. But you must have been tearing your hair out.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Lee, is really to try and get some discipline into the changing room. There's also knowing how far that they can take the discipline in terms of pushing me or pushing the coaches, and making sure that first and foremost we do everything correctly. That means turning up on time. That means wearing the correct attire. That means doing everything that we want them to do, and we do it to the best of our ability. We never had the best training facilities. I think on a Tuesday we had nowhere to train, only on the pitch, and on a Thursday we had to train down at London Coney on one of the small pitches down there. So it was always difficult. Where we was lucky, we had a few games on the Tuesday night. But it was just really me managing individuals. I think people like Ben Martin, who's I've known because obviously he was with me at Boreham Wood. I sat and had a conversation with Ben, got Ben on side. And once you get people like that who buy into what you're doing, I think they manage the changing room for you. Lee Chappell, big character. We managed to get him on side. And what a player he was for the rest of that season. He was outstanding. And it was just really winning them all over. And I think we managed to do that. I was quite lucky that Lee was with me, Lee Allinson at the time, and he was very much one of them as well, because he'd obviously played with and against some of them players, so he knew some of them. And it's just really setting some challenges. And as I say, really, we went into them last 12 games knowing exactly what we had to do. We did it. And from my point of view, probably one of the, I look at what we did at Boreham Wood in terms of winning the league, which was an outstanding, or should I say, going up into the National League and keeping St Albans up was probably two of the biggest achievements I've had in my career as a manager and as a player. But also, I wouldn't take away what we did at Stotfold and places like that, because we had to change them around and turn them into winners. And the management, I feel, was massive in terms of where you are and what you have to do to get the best out of some players.
Players nowadays, when in the Premier League, Ian, but they expect, if they're going into management, to get a Premier League club. Do you think you did it the right way, going at a lower level, then building up? Did it give you a good grounding?
I think without a shadow of doubt, I think some of the managers who go into the Premier League now probably are scared of wanting to go into the lower leagues in case they fail. But I don't think there's anything wrong in failure, because I think you learn more from failure than you do by winning things. Because when you're winning things, it's really easy. When you fail as a manager, you've got to look at yourself in the mirror and think, what have I done wrong, and try to achieve something slightly different. The one thing I've said, and I'm immensely proud of it, I'd have done 30 odd years this year in management, and I've never had a relegation on my CV, which I think is a fantastic achievement, especially when you look at some of the teams that I've taken over and some of the decisions I've made to manage teams that are in really poor situations in terms of relegation. Harlow was one of them when I went in there. Stotfold was certainly one of them when I went in there, and obviously St Albans when I went in there. Boreham Wood was slightly different because it was the end of the season. It was about rebuilding. But managers very rarely get the job now when a team's sitting top of the league, and if they do, they've been very, very fortunate. But the answer to your question, David, I think it would be great for managers to start in the lower leagues, but I think some are quite nervous of doing that because of failure. And I think if you go straight in at the top and you get an opportunity to do that, and you're working with good players, because that is another thing that's very, very frustrating, is that you've been working with outstanding footballers who don't give the ball away, who very, very rarely make mistakes, and then you're going into the lower leagues where players will make mistakes and decision making will be incorrect, and it will make you very frustrated as a manager or a coach if you're dealing with them situations.
So, having pulled off what was seen to be impossible and avoided relegation, what did you look for the following season? Because you brought in one or two useful players, Ben Hurd, experience at the back, But then Junior Moraes to go alongside Louis Theophanous. What an attack that was.
Yeah, and I felt at the time, with the way we'd finished the season, I felt we would probably go on and do really well. I'm very loath to say win the league, because I think it's a very hard league to win. I'm always, at the start of the season, people can say what they want to say. I always believe, first and foremost, let's not get relegated. Secondly, let's try and play football to the best of our ability and give the supporters some enjoyment. But let's try and, first and foremost, try and make the playoffs. If we can do that, it'd be a fantastic achievement. And I know over my time, once you get in the playoffs, it's the team that goes in there in form that 9 times out of 10 end up getting promoted. So I think up till Christmas we were on track. We had the fantastic cup run, where I think you probably all agree with me, we probably were the most unfortunate team not to progress that day against Carlisle, because we all agree that they should have had a player when we were 1-0 up, and we were playing exceptionally well. We were way on top. And things like that change the game, and you always know when the manager subs the player a minute later that they've got away with one. But immensely proud in terms of the way we performed that day. We run out of legs in the second half, and our energy levels dropped, and they took their opportunities and chances. And then you look at the decision, to allow Junior Moraes to move on. Probably one of the biggest decisions we've had to make for a period of times, in terms of, first and foremost, it gives the club some finance. But secondly, the one thing that I promise all the players that I sign is, when I sit and talk to them, is that I'm here to help them and progress them. I'm not here to hinder them and slow their process down and progress down. And the one thing with Junior, the opportunity come. And it's strange, because when Peterborough come in, they wanted Junior and Louis, but I couldn't allow Louis to go, because Junior was suspended at that period, wasn't he? He got sent off twice. He got sent off against Hemel at home, and then he got sent off on the Saturday against Maidenhead. So he had a 5-game ban. So we allowed Junior to go and train, but we couldn't allow Louis to go. And I think it really affected Louis in terms of not having that opportunity to progress. Junior went up there and played a lot of games behind closed doors and done some training, and they came in, made an offer, and we as a club accepted it. But I felt we lost our way after that, because we never really progressed in that second half of the season as well as we've done in the first half of the season. I've got to look back and say some of the signings that I made probably weren't as good as some of the players that we left. And as I've said before, every manager has to hold his hand up and say that the decisions I got at that Christmas probably weren't the right ones. But I'm not going to say the players were wrong in what they did. They obviously felt we were going to go up, and I didn't think I got the team correct and the team morale right with what we signed in the second half of that season.
What about you, Jake? What who standout players for you during Ian's time?
Oh, the whole of Ian's time. That's a lot of players. I mean, I was going to sort of ask about you, Ian. You mentioned the morale there. That end of that season. We had a question from a viewer asking, how difficult was it to change the squad and get rid of some of the players like Ben Martin, Sam Kokorin, etc. towards the end? Not long ago they'd done a brilliant job for you and had done a lot for the club and for yourself. How difficult was that?
I think we made a decision. We were going through that second season, wasn't it? We were going through a period where we weren't performing, we weren't winning games. I think we were on a horrendous run in that second half of the season, and it was just a decision to try and freshen it up for the following season. We held an in-house training game behind closed doors. We got some trialists to be sent in. One of them being Solomon Sambu, the other one being I can't think of his bloody name, big tall lad who went off to Hamilton Academic course in midfield.
Kieran Monlouis.
Kieran Monlouis, yeah. Kieran came in and they had the trial game, and we liked what we see. We had 3 or 4 players that we really liked. We felt that they were the right age. They were all around 2021, all looking to get back into the pro game and progress. So it was a big decision to say, right, let's go and sign these boys and release 3 or 4 or 5 of the older ones. And that was the decision that I came to at the time. Tough decision, because obviously I've got that conversation. I'm not one of these that just gets rid of people. I like to think that I do it correctly in terms of ringing the player up, having a conversation and explaining the reason why that we want to look and go down maybe a different route. And that's what we did. It took a couple of games to get everybody used to playing, because it's a difficult time to change. You know, the one thing I've always said is every season when you're at clubs like St Albans and that, is that anyone that we produce or progress and we lose them at the end of the season if they've done really well for us. And that was the one thing that we tried to do, was move some players on. All these players sort of signed sort of 18 months deals, so we knew that at the end of the season we wouldn't be in the same situation where we were going to lose these players. And then I think we were quite lucky with, you know, Lee Allinson, obviously Solomon Wobakai, David Longking, people like that. That, you know, Lee, once he moved on to Biggleswade, Devontae Stanley is another one. Is that anyone that Lee felt that he was going to lose and move on to the next level, that he would always give me first refusal on them. And every time it was either a Wheelstone or a Hemel or somebody was getting involved, Lee would ring me in, and then it was about us reacting quicker than them speaking to the players. And as I said, we've been very lucky. Tafari Moore last year have all come via Lee Allinson giving me the nod in terms of have a look at this player, he's well worth it. So, you know, it's worked on that side as well.
Jake said about you had a lot of players in. 152 you used in your 302 games. 8 I think it is, went over.
Is that a lot?
Sorry?
Is that a lot?
I wouldn't have said so. No, not really.
Oh, really?
No. The top appearances: 237, Tom Bender; just under 200, Zane Banton; then David Noble, Sam Merson, Dean Snedker, Ben Hurd, Dave Dijou, and Solomon Sambo. I say they're all the ones that played over 100 games for you. There's some decent ones in there.
Obviously, David's still there. Zane's still there. You know, we played a game with Tom Bender last week, and he was brilliant. To see Tom again, you know, at Billericay, and it's great to catch up with Tom. And he was a great stalwart for us, you know, in terms of putting his head and his legs on the line for us. He picked up some big injuries. He was a fantastic player for the club. And as I say, I think we're quite lucky with some of the players. David Noble, you know, for me, was probably one of the best signings we made. It was just in the end that, you know, he got to that age where, you know, around him we had to put legs, because technically no one could teach him how to play football. He was just that good. But then, you know, once your legs start to go, and I certainly know that myself, is you have to put legs around them. And then if that doesn't work, you know, David made the right decision that he wanted to get into coaching. And I think he's already showed how well he's done with that.
That Carlisle game you mentioned earlier, and that was a fantastic day for everybody. We all enjoyed it. A couple of years before that, we had Mansfield, and for 43 minutes, we all loved that. 1-0 up, lost 8-1 in the end. But I suppose Forest Green Rovers, that will always be the game you'll be remembered for at Clarence Park?
You could say that, yeah. I mean, obviously because of the way it went, but it's a fantastic achievement. But no one. I always look back, David, and I look at our performances at Met Police and Casuals and Concord. No one realises at Concord that Michael Johnson has made an unbelievable penalty save with 8 minutes to go. So we have to enjoy them days. But for me, we still had an inconsistency in terms of our performances. But I knew with the squad we had that on their day they could beat anybody. And that's why I felt really confident going into the game. And the one thing you have to do is make sure that we're as good as we can be, we're as prepared as we could be. And you just hope that Forest Green might just take their eye off the ball slightly, because they were top of the league. I don't think they'd been beaten away from home, or if they had, for about 18 games. They had an unbelievable manager who on the day was absolute class, I have to say. And he had a very good side. We had to ride our luck. And in any game like that, you have to ride your luck. BBC Match of the Day being there gives everybody a lift. The crowd on the day were, 4,500, was it 4,350? Outstanding support in terms of where the town has been and supported me and the players. It was just one of them special days. And you'd love to live that day every single day of your life, but you can't, because you've got to come down to earth the next day, and it's difficult. And then obviously you're looking at the draw, and though the draw wasn't kind to us in terms of giving us Boreham Wood away, we always knew it was going to be difficult. People have said we might have got it wrong there, but in my opinion, I don't think we got it wrong. We got it right. We went there, and listen, I've probably gone forward too quick. You still want to talk about Forest Green, so let's go back to Forest Green. Great day, unbelievable day. The town was unreal. Come and supported us, and I think everybody really enjoyed it.
We say everybody enjoyed it. Can you still enjoy games as a manager, even Forest Green, when it's the biggest game for a lot of us? Can you enjoy those games as manager? Because we see you sometimes question a referee's decision. It doesn't look like total enjoyment.
I just think I just get involved in it, David. I'm just one of them. Is that, as I've said before, I do question referees, and I'm wrong to do it because they've got an unbelievable job. I just feel that sometimes I want what's right for me and the football club, because I do feel sometimes if you don't get the rub of the green, that you have to question them things. But as I've said again before, I don't want to preempt anything now, but I've never been shown a red card on the sideline since I've been a manager in 30 odd years. So
that's it. Saturday.
Somewhere along the line, I'll ring you up, Lee. But listen, listen. I do test, and other managers for where I was very good. I could wind up other managers, and they would lose their focus, and I knew exactly where I was on a game of football, is that I could get back into the zone within seconds of where I was. So I might lose it for 10 seconds, but I'm back into it, and I knew exactly where I was. Some of the other managers just couldn't handle the way I behaved on the sideline in terms of questioning every decision. And that's just how I've been all my life in terms of that. As a player, I wasn't like that. At the end of the day, I think I got 5 yellow cards in my career, and one of them was for questioning an offside decision. So it's just the way that's just, I suppose, the way you're wired at the end of the day. I just want to win every game. I go into, it's funny, it's very funny, because in the morning, I'm quite nervous. But the minute the whistle done, there's no nerves whatsoever. Leading up to a game, I'm quite nervous, which is great, because as a player, I was nervous. And people have said to me, if you're not nervous, then you shouldn't be in it. But as soon as the whistle goes, nerves are gone, and it's just concentrating on about us getting a result and trying to make sure we try and play attractive football, because I don't want to be one of them sides that just try and play unattractive sides and try and win 1-0. It doesn't suit me, doesn't suit the players I want. I love playing with wingers. I was a winger myself, and I enjoy that side of it. And I think over the time we've had some good wingers. But again, it's just, that day was, as I said to you, then you said it there, David, it was a great day for everybody. And the town, as I said, came out. We've spoke to some of the bars. It's probably one of the best days some of them bars have had over the last 10 years in terms of the takings they made. They had every single person in the whole of St Albans had an unbelievable day, and that's what you want, and you want it more on a regular basis. Because the one thing, when I spoke at my first interview or second interview to come to the club, the owners said there that this club has the potential to be as big as Stevenage. And at the time you think, probably not, but it has. When you see what happens in the big games, the town does come out, and they do get behind the club. They're unbelievable people, supporters, should I say.
You mentioned the pre-match nerves, but Jake and Lee will have seen, just like I have, pre-match, you're talking to anybody around the ground. You're almost leaving the players to themselves, or you're leaving it to the coaches to sort it out. You seem to stand back prior to kickoff.
I think by the time you've done your pre-match, we always just sit down at 1:45 or stand up. I'd stand up, they sit down, and we give them the directions. We give them the name of the team, and give them everything they've got. All the set pieces are up in the change room, so they all know their jobs. We'd have worked on set pieces during the week in terms of the training schedules. And if everyone didn't know their job, they needed to ask. We'd try and give them a bit of a rundown about the opposition. but I'm also one of them that don't want to be spending too much time about the opposition, because we've got to worry about ourselves. If there's something there you need to be aware of, if a player that will cause us problems, we need to make sure we're aware of them. Set pieces are massive in any game, for and against. We always used to try and let the goalkeeper know that, if they got a penalty, which way the ball would be struck, and it's just really making life really easy for them, but not put too much pressure on them. So by 2 o'clock, it was for them to get themselves ready for a game. By 2:20, they'll be going out doing the warm up, and then you rightly said, it's down to the coaches then to get them ready. They'd come back in, and we just literally have a 5 minute of a not even a get together, just to make sure that everyone was switched on. But as I say, I'm one of them that you don't have to give players too much information. I think if you feed them too much information, I think they'll lose their way in terms of where they are. And when they're at St Albans, for me, they're all good players. There's a reason why they're there. And you know yourself, David, you've seen some very, very good sides at St Albans. And it's just really making sure that they've got the correct information. They're right in their own minds in terms of their jobs. And then let them go and express themselves and enjoy themselves and have a smile on their face. And if we come off and we give 100% or more than 100%, no one can complain. Some games we've come off and not give that, but then sometimes that comes through if we're not performing well and confidence isn't high. And we certainly see that in a few of the games when we was there.
Right, I will stand back this time, Ian. Come on, Lee, Jake, chip in.
The first thing, one thing I will say is that the bar takings at the Forest Green game will be down to me and Jake. So that's probably where we're going with that. Obviously, it would come as no surprise, Ian, that we've got quite a few questions coming in from supporters. Yeah. The one thing for me is the fact that, you're at the club for a considerable amount of time, and you are so ensconced in the work ethic of these players and stuff. And you're up in the club bar and in lights. And you were the architect for me for the best time that I've had as a St Albans fan of 30 odd years. So my question to you would be, given the amount of effort and love you've given to our football club, were you disappointed in how it all ended? Could you sort of look back with compassion, regret, pride?
First and foremost, thank you for them kind words, because they do mean a lot to me in terms of where I am. Immense pride, immense passion, and I'm still quite sad now in terms of the way it happened. Because, as I say, I did have an allegiance to the football club. I felt I gave more than 100% in trying to turn that football club around. When we went in there, it was a football club that was in dire need of some changes. What we did, and you have to say that the owners have spent the money as well to get where we are now. So it hurt me at the time. They always say that time does hurt. I've been very fortunate that I've ended up going to a fantastic football club like Hendon, who's got tremendous in terms of what they've done over the years. That Lee's there, and the people behind the scenes are fantastic people. But going back to your question, Lee, yeah, it hurt at the time. It hurts still now, I feel. But I've got immense pride for what we did. People like yourself, with the words that you've just used, gives me tremendous encouragement from that side of it. But it was a special time. I really enjoyed it. So I've been very lucky in my life. I really have. And to have I've got to be wrong, 3 clubs like Stotfold, Boreham Wood and yourself, I've been very fortunate to be involved with them 3 clubs because they've all been very special to me. And the same when I left Boreham Wood, it hurt for a period of time, and you do get over it. But at the time, as I say, it was probably unforeseen from where I was, and it's disappointing.
Jake, got something, chuck it? Any questions?
Yeah, I suppose around that same time as well, Ian, you did I think most supporters, maybe a lot of supporters don't realise, but I think you did a brilliant job as well behind the scenes with the commercial stuff. I think the club has grown, we talk about on the pitch, but off the pitch as well, commercially wise, you'll know, Ian, the club grew so much with what you did. But then you had that awkward period at the end, didn't you, where you were still commercial manager, but after you sort of were no longer manager. how much did it hurt, sort of being in that awkward position as well?
It was very difficult. Understandably, when I took the commercial role, it was two separate jobs. So the football job was totally separate to the commercial. And then it was me really seeing how I would progress in terms of the commercial after no longer being the manager there. And I'd say it was very, very difficult. I think it's unfair on some of the people that was working there that I was still there after losing my job as a manager. It was unfair that, you know, in terms of me just being around the place, and I just think it was a matter of time. I thought long and hard about it. Tried to do the job, but I think a lot of the enthusiasm and not so much aggression, but willingness to want to go and make the club successful. I'd lost a little bit of that, and it was the right decision for me to tender my resignation from that side of the job. And I think it was best for both parties in terms of that. As I say, it was right for the football club to move on and for me to move on. Though, as I say, it's still raw at times because, you know, you don't give 6.5 years of your life to something, and I think Lee rightly says it there in terms of trying to turn it around. And I think, you know, all of us from when you was there, Jake, Lee was there, you know, to what Andrew Hibsley and people like that have done now, because we all know the football club is social media run now. And you have to be that way because every club is literally out there. And, you know, you guys were the first ones to take it on, and Andrew's taken it to another level. So it's, you know, without the support of everybody, we wouldn't be where we are now. But hopefully, and as I say, somewhere along them lines, I've helped to put the football club where it is.
Well, your
You've
record,
done more
Ian,
than that, mate, haven't you? So,
well, on that point, Lee, in 6 full seasons as manager, you only once finished outside the top 10, which is our best record since the 1960s. So that's not a bad record to have. But I remember after the defeat at AFC Sudbury in the FA Cup last year, you remember it, Neil Metcalfe and I spoke to you after the game, and there's no doubt there you felt the axe was getting closer, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm surprised I got the Saturday against Farnborough. It'd been interesting if we'd have beat Farnborough and then we'd have beat Braintree on the Tuesday night. Because on the Braintree on the Tuesday night, football-wise, we were very, very good. We just lacked a real cutting edge in front of goal. If we'd have won that night, whether I'd have got another week or another game, we don't know. So I felt it might come after the Sudbury game. And even then, in that game, you know, we had 82% possession for 20 minutes. And we just had no cutting edge. I've said it all along, is that Mitchell Weiss is a massive part of my side at the beginning of last season. And we lost Mitchell in the first game at Chelmsford, if you remember. He got brought down for a blatant penalty. The diagnosis, he had nerve damage, and it was only when I said to him go and get an X-ray, we found out that he'd got a fracture in his leg, which then set us back another sort of 5 or 6 weeks. So I think you've seen how good Mitchell is, and the partnership with Sean in terms of what they bring to the team. And I felt that was a big dent in the way the side played last year. We failed to score, I think, at home. I know Sean scored a goal against Taunton that got disallowed for the encroachment on the wall. We missed a penalty against Worthing. I felt against Hungerford and teams like that, we were outstanding. We just never had no cutting edge in front of goal. But our ball retention was very, very good. But as I say, because we didn't score goals away from home, we rode Ellacott at Tonbridge, didn't we? But, you know, we'd won 3, drawn 3 and lost 3. So we wasn't in a poor position. We know if we'd have beat Braintree that night, we'd have been virtually 8th in the league. So the question is, if we'd have won that game, would I have got the sack the next day? Who knows? At the end of the day, that's not my decision. And we have to look back at it and say, you know, that the decision that they made to move me on and do what they did is worked out really well from the club, because to get to the playoffs last year was a fantastic achievement.
There's probably a lot more really good nights, days we could talk about, Ian, from your time. But let's bring it down. Let's go to the low points. AFC Sudbury is probably one of them. Bishop Stortford, also the FA Cup, just a ridiculous first goal, put us on the back foot. But what about Harrogate Town away in the FA Trophy? What a night that was. -5 degrees, snowing. They got a goal 6 seconds from time down the park on the Saturday to force a replay. But that replay wasn't one of our greatest nights, was it? And you, of course, well, you can tell the story. You had quite a couple of long journeys, didn't you?
Sorry, what was the team again you said?
Harrogate Town, FA Trophy.
Harrogate. Oh, wow. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. Yeah, that was strange, wasn't it? That was strange.
5-0.
We went and watched them at Nuneaton on the Tuesday night, and their record was unbelievable leading up to that. And they lost on the night 2-0. And we thought they must have played a weakened side. And then we played them on a Saturday. Went 1-0 up. Tom Bender, I think, had an unbelievable header save late on to go 2-0 up. They scored out of nothing in terms of in the 92nd minute, as you say. Travelled up to Harrogate on the Tuesday. Went through, as you say, every sort of weather that you could ever dream of. And when you say we got beat 5-0, David, if we'd have got beat 12-0 that night, it would have been a fair result. Trust me, they absolutely battered us. And I remember players wearing gloves and having gloves inside their shorts. That's how cold it was up there, and that's how poor we was on the night. Then to travel home and get home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then get on a train at 6 o'clock to go back to Leeds for a meeting I had there at 10 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, that's.
I have to say, Ian, that was the coldest night I've ever. I mean, I was on the social media that night, and I was speaking to Simon Weaver, their manager, before the game, just to get some a rundown, and he knows they got away with one at Clarence Park. He said they were second best in every department, and they didn't even deserve to have this opportunity.
No,
but I think you were absolutely right, because obviously I came down on the coach with the players, and although the atmosphere on the coach towards the game was one of, it was more hope than it was in you know what I mean, expectation, because Harrogate at home, they were a formidable force. You know, not a lot of teams go there and get anything. But as you say, it was so freezing cold, and everything was against us, wasn't it? On that night, I couldn't even. My phone had frozen. I couldn't even tap the screen on my iPad to get the match report out because it was so cold. So God knows what it must have been like on the touchline for you
Dean
guys.
Snedker was absolutely outstanding on the night. He's made about 6 or 7 saves, and as I say, it could have been. I think my biggest defeat is 6. That could have been my biggest defeat in terms of the way they punished us. They really punished us. And then I think they played Billericay in the next round, and Billericay beat them, didn't they? Or something like that. But as I say, we had our chances on the Saturday, and they're little things that you look back at, and you know, could we have won that game, seeing it out? But the answer to your thing is, I had a meeting in Leeds at 9:30, I think 10 o'clock. So I was one of them that I felt that we needed to travel together, and I went all the way back to St Albans, got home, literally had about an hour and a half sleep, and then got on a train back to Leeds for the meeting the next day. And it was still cold up there the next day when I got there, so horrendous.
You were manager during the COVID years, Ian. How difficult was that with training, and then on match days, you're sending the players out there, and all stadiums are empty, of course?
Yeah, I think do you include in my record that the first COVID year when we got shut down, that we were 3rd from bottom or 4th from bottom? So that was my worst season. Yes.
Yep.
I still think when we got shut down that week after the Braintree game, that was one of the best sides we'd had going into the last. And I believe we'd have gone on a really good run then. I think we had David Noble, Manash Sundaya, and Solomon Wobakai, the 3 midfield players. The only area that I felt we really struggled was up front. And young Joe, who had got 18 goals, he was leading it on his own at times up there. We had Zane on one thing, and I think we had what's his name, the little winger.
You had Harry Forster on loan from Watford.
Yeah, we had him, and the back four was as good as we had it. So I think we was as good as anything that we'd had at that stage of the season. Then obviously it shuts down. And then we went for a really, in terms of where we was, David, it was very easy in terms of retaining your squad because no one was moving on. There was no transfers. No one was doing anything, so they didn't know where to stand. So we could get players in, get them signed for the following season. In terms of training, we made a decision when we was back training that we would train, I think, for April and May, which we did. That was probably, and then we had some decisions where we brought them back in. And then the season got delayed to the 1st of October, wasn't it? And we ended up playing an FA Cup first game of the season. So we gave them, I think we gave them August off, in terms of July and August off, and then we came back in again for September. But again, it was just playing. There's nothing we could do. We were just playing the rules what the government wanted us to play. I felt there was, and to this day I don't know whether it's true or not, is that the finance the National League got, people have said it was promised to the south and the north. I don't know that. I can't answer that question. But to actually have the finances given to certain people and certain clubs and not allow the north and the south to continue was incorrect. And a lot of people have wasted a lot of money in them periods in terms of what we had to do, what we didn't have to do. In front of playing in front of crowds, it was great away from home, but at home, obviously, you miss your crowd. So, but it was just one of them things. It was just really, it's just a peculiar time that I don't think anyone's ever been through. Did it hurt us? No, it didn't in terms of playing in front of no supporters. I think we were allowed to stream in the end, wasn't we? Live in the end, wasn't it? But again, it's just we went. I think we were unbeaten, weren't we, until we hit the January period again. And that's
the first defeat was Sutton in the Trophy in mid-December.
And that's when we went through the COVID went through the club. I had it myself. The whole club, virtually, I think 12 or 13 went down with it, and we had to shut the club down for 2 weeks. And I think that was probably the first week back after shutting down, where we played Chelmsford and really were quite poor on the day. They were better than us. But I think with COVID, I think everyone agrees you're not sure where you are in terms of your fitness levels, in terms of whether you're going to be tired, whether you're going to be sharp. And I think we just had one too many players go down with it, and looking to get them back as quick as we can. Wasn't sure really where we was going to be physically or mentally in terms of where we were going to be, and we just wasn't good enough. I think we went on the Tuesday then to Welling, didn't we? And we won 2-0. And then I think the season shut down very quickly after that. I think.
The Sutton defeat, Chelmsford defeat, win at Welling, draw. You were at Welling, weren't you, Jake, for that one? Draw at Billericay, and then the draw at home to Hemel Hempstead. Yeah,
and all those games. I think Billericay away was the bad one, wasn't it? When they put out a young side, we drew 3-3, didn't we? But again, that second half of that season, you just didn't know where you were going to be, what players were going down with COVID. We had to do tests every week, so every training session, players had to be tested. Every game, players had to be tested, and we just had to make sure on a Friday that the tests were done and sent in to make sure that players were available for the Saturday. So it wasn't one of them you could plan great in terms of where we was. But that was for everybody. You know, we wasn't in a situation or a position like a Premiership club where we can do those things.
Lee, Jake, any more questions?
Yeah, it was all very strange, wasn't it? I think yeah, it was unusual, but it was just another one of those, like you said, that team we'd put together during that COVID season. And I remember speaking to you, Ian, and you signed a certain Sean Jeffers, and you said to me, this would be one of the best signings I ever make for this club. And he's turned out to be quite decent. I think you've got an eye for a player still.
I'd like to think so. As I say, people like Sean that excites me because if you look at his record until he comes to St Albans isn't brilliant. I think he had one half-decent year, I think, at Chelmsford where they played him up front. But a lot of the times they ended up playing him in wide areas. And I think Sean's one of them, is that in and around the penalty spot is that he's just an artist in terms of what he wants to do. He just wants to score goals. And I think players like that, you have to put people in and around them. I think everybody used to say, you know, Gary Lineker, I mean, his record is second to none. but everything he scored was inside the box. But he was just literally come alive, and they're special people and special players, and you just have to work your teams around them. If you don't create chances, and that's why it disappointed me a little bit for the first 9 games last year. We created some brilliant chances, we just didn't finish them off. And I think Sean probably only had 1 goal when I did leave the football club, and then he went on an unbelievable run and ended up getting 26, 27 goals again. So I think his record with the club is probably as good as most players, and I think he's better than one goal every 1.5 games, isn't he? So a good signing for the club. For me, it was a great signing for us. But it's like people like David Moyo. We signed David Moyo, who did really well and went off to Hamilton Academicals. So we Joe Trifano went off and obviously when we signed for Havant, was it a great move for him? They were full-time. It was something that he wanted to go and do. So all the forwards we've had there, Juni Moraes went off, and all the forwards that we've managed to get, we do lose them after a time because obviously other clubs take notice of what they've done. And it's the same with Sean. I think he's 30, 31 now. But he's still a fit boy. He looks after himself, and there's still goals to come from him by.
Your football career is not over, Ian. You've joined Lee, your son, down at Hendon. What's it like taking orders from your son?
Quite good, to be fair. It's actually nice, actually leading into games and weekends. It's there isn't the same pressure, though. I do feel sorry for him at times, especially last year. As I've said to anybody, a relegation battle will make you better in your long term in terms of your management career. And last year would have taught him so much in terms of how he has to handle himself, how he has to handle players, how he has to handle situations. The media being one of them, supporters being another. Where I've been lucky that I've been very fortunate in my time that I've not had supporters that turn on you. And probably get frustrated with some of the decisions you make, but they've been very honest and very loyal supporters. And he's lucky here with Hendon that the supporters have been very good. They back him totally. The board back him totally in terms of what he's trying to do. They can see what he's trying to do. But a relegation battle doesn't hurt anyone in terms of your progress and in terms of your mentality of learning to deal with situations. And that's what I think made him better. I think some of the signings he's made this year in terms of what we see towards the end of last year. Again, bearing in mind is you're only as good as your budget at the end of the day. You look to teams that have got a similar budget to yourself and try and pinch their players, but try and pinch their better players. And that's what I always felt, that being at St Albans, I'd always have to go in the league below and try and poach the best players in the league below, because they all want to try and better themselves. They all want to try and step up a league, and that's what we did a lot of the time. So financially, we knew we could compete with other clubs, with them players, and that's what we managed to do. But as soon as they have 1 or 2 or 3 good years with us, you always know they're going to move on, as you see with people like Solomon Wobukai and David Longking, and they've gone on and done, made big careers for themselves. Devontae Stanley's gone to Havant now. Is that a forward move or is it a sideways move? And only Devontae will know that. Tafari Moore has obviously gone to Oxford City. For me, it's a national league, but I see on Saturday he was sitting on the bench, so he's better off playing week in, week out. So again, you've got to look at decisions that these players make. I've always been one of them, David, that I want to play every week. So whether it was going to be the right reason for me to move on, it had to be the right reason that I wanted to play. And that's the way a lot of players are. But some players now will see that that's progression. And that's their choice at the end of the day. And you have to say thank you for what you've done and we move on. And Devontae to come back from the injury he suffered down at Tonbridge and do what he's done, he's been outstanding. And you've got to say that he's probably lost 2 years of his career because of the injury he had. So he done fantastic well last year. To come back as quick as he come within a year and do what he did, and then go to Tonbridge and score the goal like he did, it's fantastic. But they're just good. I've been very fortunate that I've just had good people around me, and they're good kids, and no one wishes them any harm whatsoever. You just wish them all the success, and because they went and worked hard for me, they worked hard for St Albans City Football Club, and you wish them all the best in terms of where their careers and their path takes them.
Working alongside Lee at Hendon, I'd imagine it still takes up a lot of your time. But I could imagine it's not quite the pressure you had and the demands you had as manager, so you are able to relax a bit more.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I'm doing some of the commercial work at Hendon, so we're out there actively trying to get sponsors in, which is very, very difficult. I think, as everyone will see now, the cost of living has gone through the roof, and people haven't got that extra money that they want to throw at a football club. So it's very difficult in what you get. You have to be giving companies something back in return, and as I say, that's where social media comes in a lot, and how many people you can get them out to. But certainly in terms of, I don't think I might have missed one training session since I've been there, and that was the first training session this year because I was still coming back from holiday. But everything that I do, I try and support Lee and help him. We're on the phone constantly every single day. We discuss things around the team, but it's his decision with the final team he goes with. He'll ask me my opinion. I'll be open and honest with him, as I've always been with everybody. But he has to make that decision. But whatever decision he makes, I'll support him. I'll support him 100% and help him from that side of it. I think he's enjoyed having me around with the experience that we've got together. Because you have to say, with the time he was with me at St Albans, we were a good team, and we're working, even though it's vice versa, and we're working well together. We brought Mark Charles Smith in, who's a great kid, and he's got a good background. I had Mark as a player for me at Boreham Wood. He's been to Harrow doing the assistant manager's job there, and he's coming as assistant manager. And the three of us are doing extremely well, and we're enjoying it. We've got a different focus in terms of what players we've got in this year. And hopefully we can improve on last year, which I think we will. We had a good start on Saturday, but we've got to go and put Paul Town away on this Saturday, and Paul are virtually a conference south side. And we see that last year. You see what Truro did on Saturday. They're big towns, they're big clubs, and they would hold their own in the conference south as they go forward in the next year or two.
You're a football man through and through here, and you obviously follow so many clubs, particularly old ones, I guess, to see what's happening. Let's put you on the spot. What do you think St Albans can achieve this season, or where do you think we might finish?
On the spot, I think it's me personally. I think they find it very difficult to achieve what they achieved last year. I think David's probably found something that was a frustration to himself in terms of you have to rebuild virtually every year. And it takes a period of time. He's had a great start on Saturday in terms of winning his first game this season. It's really, for me, is how quickly the players progress together in terms of where they are, what they're doing. And then it's really just how quickly they can take it forward. I think last year, and I said it at the beginning of last year, the year that we got promoted with Boreham Wood, it was a good year. And what I mean about that is, when you look at the teams that were in the league last year, I felt it was a great year for getting in the playoffs, because you haven't got a Torquay, you haven't got a Maidstone, you had a Havant, you've got a Worthing. But look at the clubs who are in there now, Yeovil. You've got 4 or 5 really big clubs in there this year that I think it'll be very difficult to finish in front of those clubs. And that's why I'm saying, at the end of the day, I think they can make the playoffs. I don't think they'll improve on what they did last year, which was frustrating from David's point of view, because I know how he works. But from the club's point of view, is trying to just progress year on year in. And that's their main thing. But there's 4 or 5 really big clubs there that you've got to go and compete with. And first and foremost, it's financial. And they're big financial players in the league. And it'll be very difficult to try and improve on what they did last season.
Talking of David Noble, did you have a hand in him getting the job?
I felt that he was the right person to move the club forward. At the time, I felt that he had progressed unbelievably well in terms of his coaching. Chris Winton had done a fantastic job being my number 2. And then the club had to make a decision on Chris or David. But I think David, in terms of the coaching side of it, had improved tremendously well in terms of where he was. He'd really taken well to being a coach. And him and Chris Winton, I felt, were a really good combination. I felt they were taking the club, in terms of where I was, to another level. in terms of the coaching, and they were taking a lot of stuff away from me because of what they were doing on the coaching field. I think Chris at the time felt it was right that he wanted to step. He felt that we'd come as a partnership, and he was right that he wanted to step back down. Steve Conroy took the decision as well a couple of days after we left, and that left David there in terms of whether it was the club's decision that they wanted him to do it permanently. I don't know. That's something that the club would have to take from that side of it. But I felt David personally was a good man to take it forward.
Right, Lee, Jake, over to you.
I mean, just the final thing from me. Football is a very sort of fickle world, isn't it, Ian? You know, and fans are very easy to sort of criticise and condemn, but not as quick to sort of congratulate. And I think one of the things for me, we've got some messages here. The fans would like to relay to you that the fact that you've held your head when it wasn't, by your own admission, things weren't going well towards the end. To the middle of last season, but I think what fans want to recognise is the fact you have put all your passion and all your heart into becoming manager of our football club. And you know, I think that you would be very much aware of how much the fans think of you and the legacy that you created. You spoke very early on about the legacy that George Graham has created, and then Arsene Wenger sort of like carried on from that and sort of taken it, elevated it. And I think that is a very good comparison, because you have sort of started a trend in terms of the quality of players and the way players think about playing their football. And I think now David has sort of taken that on as well. So I'd like to sort of thank you, because you've always been absolutely amazing to me and my family as well. Let's not forget that. So, and having worked with you on the media side of things, I wish you all the very, very best, and thank you for everything you've done for our football club.
Thank you, Lee. As I say, the really kind words. It does mean a hell of a lot to me. As I say, it was a football club that I took into my heart, and as I say, it was something very special to me. And as I say, I've been very lucky in my life that a lot of the things I've done is that they've been really enjoyable times. And I have to say, the 6.5 years at St Albans were really enjoyable. The supporters are really good people. They support the town, and they do come out in the numbers, as I say, and they're very kind words, and I really do appreciate that.
Jake?
Yeah, I think echo everything Lee says. I think Lee, you sort of said to this to me off camera previously, that the only thing about your departure is you never really got a chance to say goodbye. I don't think you got the chance to say goodbye, and the supporters never got a chance to say thank you, goodbye to you. So
yeah, I think you know, I think in my own heart of hearts is that last season really for me, Jake, would have been at the end of the season. I'd have liked to have gone upstairs. And left Chris and David to do the role. But as I say, he never really got that opportunity. But that was in my mind. This was going to be, or that was going to be my last year as a manager. But I just felt I've got something to offer the younger guys, and some experience and help and support. And that's what I'm doing with Lee. And I think if I was given the opportunity, that would have been my decision at the end of the season. I discussed it with the family that that's what I was going to do. But unfortunately, I wasn't given that opportunity, but I felt that would have been the right opportunity for me to move upstairs, and then Chris and David take it on as a team. So thank you.
Oh, we thank you, Ian. It's 6.5 years, and it flew by. You were so great in the post-match interviews. I could put anything to you. If you disagreed with it, it didn't make a jot of difference. We could still have our conversation the same as normal. You were so easy to deal with. An absolute pleasure, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Pod Full of Saints this evening as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for your support as well.
Cheers, Ian.
All the best, Ian. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.